How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, we may be a little late to the party. We did a video on P. Diddy before, but people are asking this channel in particular, can you explain a special housing unit? And as we know right now, I believe P. Diddy is up in Brooklyn at the Federal Detention Center. So people are kind of curious about what is the special housing unit. So I thought what me and Russ could do is kind of break down the different statuses that you may find in a special housing unit. So again, a special housing unit are usually housing units that have a higher level of security. So protective custody, punitive units, stabilization units. So those would be units where you may put inmates on a constant watch. And in this case, we're talking about the jail. I wish we could say terms are pretty consistent across the country. That, you know, what a special housing unit is. And let's say this federal jail could be the same as what we utilize in a prison, but terminology varies in corrections. So we're just going to give you a basic understanding of the different type of statuses that you'll find in a special housing unit, knowing that this is the highest level of restriction and basically what P. Diddy could expect if he's on any one of these types of statuses. And my guest today is going to be Russ Hamilton. And guys, just real quick, got some books on the market. We got Inmate Manipulation Decoded and Breaking Boundaries, Understanding and Preventing Undue Familiarity in Corrections. These are both available on Amazon and on Blue 360 Media, guys. And we find the link to all these books in the description. We got tips for new correctional officers and their supervisors. We got How to Succeed in Corrections. And we got two new books right now, Managing Inmate Behavior. This is one of my favorites I've written. And then Unlocking Leadership Potential. So, I mean, guys, with all 6 of these books, man, there's so much you can learn right here. And even if you're not in the profession, books like Manipulation and Breaking Boundaries, this deals with the psychology of the criminal mind. So it gives you kind of a bit of an insight of how they work, you know, their thought process, the games that they may play. All right, Russ, what's up, brother?
Hey, Anthony, how's it going?
Good. Russ, you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I am also a former senior juvenile correctional officer, and I currently work for a company that does probation, work for a probation department and for a local county jail. And we do reentry and rehabilitation for those two entities. And I am also the founder of Keepers of Chaos, which is on Facebook and is dedicated to the men and women that work inside the correctional environments. Whether you're behind a badge or not, we welcome you there because you're going to learn things on how to stay safer, how to stay more mentally sharp, how to stay more mentally well, and a host of other things that have to do with corrections.
Yes. And guys, by the way, we are going to touch on a video that's from, I believe, Maricopa County on an inmate that tried to sneak past staff and get to a female inmate. He actually openly admitted that he was going to try to rape her, but we'll do that at a later date, probably maybe by tomorrow, maybe. But right now, the request for this has been a bit overwhelming. So I thought that me and Russ could kind of touch on it. But guys, again, we don't work there. But I think me and Russ together can give you a lot of insight. And then basically this is more of an expectation. But again, we don't work there. But with that said, Russ, obviously you're very familiar with the term special housing unit or SHU. How does that translate in the worlds that you've worked in?
So in California Department of Corrections, SHU would be security housing unit. And security housing units just basically were designed for inmates who are found guilty of certain disciplinary violations to serve that extra special, the jail that's inside of the prison type of sentence, because they present, a threat to other inmates, to staff, to the public, because some of them are placed there because they escaped or attempted to escape. There's a whole host of different things, though, that that are similar across the country, but they can also be varied and different. Probably the one we talk the most about, that most people know what it is administrative segregation. And administrative segregation is usually just the one that you get to before you get assigned to SHU. But if you're not assigned to SHU, you might also end up in ADSEG because you have an enemy problem, or you may have not just enemies, but you may have a high notoriety of your crime. It may be a place where you have to be put in the meantime until we figure out what to do with you.
Yeah, and guys, I want to mention something. Jails, they're not going to be long-term settings, even though trials could take a while. When you compare jails to prisons, prison is long-term. So with that said, the jails may be able to manage this special housing unit for a little bit of time, but if it truly does become long-term, or it becomes like, let's say the trial's just running really long, sometimes they have been known to even have the inmate go to a prison. They'll just separate that inmate from the other inmates, but it's just an effort to accommodate, because a lot of jails are not really designed to handle specialized long-term placement. Now, guys, there are some jails that could, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, jails are not really long-term when it comes to stay. That's kind of where the prison starts to get in. So when you have P. Diddy coming in, and we kind of talked about this before, I would think the first thing that you would have to do is, he has celebrity status. There's a couple of things that are happening all at once. But right off the bat, and I'm sure Russ would agree, regardless if P. Diddy said he was okay, he's fine, his mental health, there's no concerns, the facility, because they know the circumstances, they know who P. Diddy was, they know what type of outside lifestyle he's used to. I mean, this is technically at some level a fall from grace. Automatically the facility, because of the context, would probably put him on constant watch almost immediately. So what is constant watch? It's basically direct observation, an officer right by that door or on a monitor watching that inmate second for second. And when they're on that constant watch, because it is safety concerns, they don't always get the best food, and everything's highly restrictive because, again, right now we are trying to manage the inmate through what could be possible impulses to hurt themselves, but also gives us a chance to kind of get an understanding of, who this inmate is in this setting. Because, again, we may know who P. Diddy is, but we don't know him as an inmate. And then basically trying to see how he may need to be managed. And then mental health will ultimately make the decision to say, at this point, we believe he is not a danger to himself or others. So we could start the process of maybe lowering the watch from a constant to a close watch to eventually placing him, which eventually be a protective custody setting, which is still probably fall under the SHU or the specialized or security housing unit. But Russ, right off the bat, I would do, if I was the jail, I would, regardless if he said he was okay or not, I'm probably going to put the person, like someone like P. Diddy, automatically in a constant watch setting, correct?
I certainly would. When you look back, though, at like the history of what's gone on in some of the federal facilities, there are federal jails, and I believe the Brooklyn one is a federal jail. All you have to do, though, is look at the history of the way the feds, I'm not saying the men and women, that are on the front lines aren't doing their job, but there's been some questionable things happen. So I'm sure that at this point they will, try and do everything they can to ensure that that Mr. Combs is kept as safely as possible. But as long as we're going to throw some names out there on some things that happened at some federal facilities, we can throw Derek Chauvin out there. We can throw Whitey Bulger out there. We can throw Mr. Jeffrey Epstein out there. And there's a number of others that show that, they're not necessarily, managing things for specific people who have threats against them, because there were threats that were carried out. There was an alleged suicide that was carried out, and things like that. So in this case, I think that they're going to be hopefully more on top of it and make sure that nothing befalls P. Diddy.
And guys, even though P. Diddy has basically negated these claims, I just want to mention something. So I know people had said there were claims, but even though P. Diddy's people have said that these claims were never mentioned, that Diddy is complaining about the food and being kept in lockdown. So if he's in a state, let's say they started and they wanted to put him in a stabilization area, so basically he's a constant watch, his food would only be finger food. They're not giving someone on constant watch utensils. So he's probably going to be stuck with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or just items that he can eat by using his hand, and still very controlled. And he's not going to be in the best type of housing. It's going to be a constant watch setting. He's going to probably be in a turtle gown or a robe, and basically he's going to go through the process like any other inmate would in an effort to earn themselves back into some type of regular housing. Is I got to make sure that this inmate is not going to hurt themselves or harm themselves. So first, let's limit any opportunity they can by putting them in the most highly restrictive type of setting, which is a constant watch. Constant watch is the most restrictive setting in any correctional, jail, prison, whatever manner. It's the highest. It's where the inmate is pretty much stripped down, basically has a gown, maybe a mattress, hopefully a mattress at this point, the way the world is changing. And basically it's second by second direct observation. So do I expect them to like the food he's supposed to be delivered? If that was the case, even though we know he negated these claims, it's finger food, guys. It's finger food. All he's going to be getting is pretty much peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and maybe some tater tots. Would you agree, Russ?
Yeah, most likely. Although I think enough time has gone on now, they might have, stepped him down from some of that stuff. At the beginning, if I were the one making decisions about, his custody level, I would be initially very worried about the whole potential for self-harm and suicide and that kind of thing. And then secondarily, of course, is putting another inmate in a position to gain notoriety or infamy by carrying out an attack or even a murder on him, which is something we obviously don't want to see. But it's something that you have to take into consideration. Inmates do not think the same way the average Joe Blow citizen thinks. Their ideas are, very antisocial and not motivated by the same things that motivate us. And so the idea that someone might achieve, instant and or eternal fame by harming or killing P. Diddy should be very much in the mindset of the people making decisions about his safety. So it is something to consider, and I'm sure that all of those things are being taken under advisement and hopefully acted on.
Yeah, I think, guys, within the first 24 to 72 hours, unless there's declarations of self-harm from P. Diddy, mental health will probably start working with custody or administration to start kind of limiting the watch, maybe go from constant to 15 to ultimately where I think where me and Russ could explore a little bit more. And what Russ is getting at is what I would call at first, and I'll explain it, a non-congregate PC setting. Now, mind you guys, this is a jail. So if jails don't really manage things long-term, it's not really their responsibility. It's more of a prison responsibility. So PC for them may not mean that they have any interaction, may only have one type of PC. Their protective custody could literally be, this is where they're at. They don't have any interaction. It's an isolated unit. And maybe they're okay with that. The inmate's going through trial. And right now, it's technically the jail's not really permanent placement anyway. And then once they get through the trial and they get sentenced, now the prison's going to have to pick it up. And the prison would probably be more concerned with long-term placement, where if I got an inmate that's placed in PC, my goal would be is to ultimately or try my best to move him from non-congregate to congregate. And what do I mean by that? Because it's more long-term, is that I would introduce the inmate safely wise to the PC system. They're going to be isolated, single cell, whatever it is. But eventually, because I don't want the person decompensating, I want to make sure they do have some interaction. I would try it eventually to start moving him to a congregate PC, a congregate protective custody, maybe still single cell, but I would like to have some very controlled interaction with some of the PC inmates that basically we make sure are not a security risk. But I don't know if you're going to need all that in the jail, because in the jail, it's not necessarily long-term placement. So I'm thinking, Russ, and tell me if you agree, they may not even have, but I could be wrong, they may not even have a congregate versus non-congregate PC. For them, it just may be a PC isolated unit because it's not really long-term housing. It's only housing there until the trial goes through.
Yeah, I would say that we probably don't have a clear picture of that. I would say that more likely they probably focus more on compatibility, and compatibility, generally breaks down into who's potentially a violent threat and who's not, and to some lesser degrees, based on gang statuses, based on everything else. I mean, people don't like hearing this, but ethnicity is a huge factor because of the prison politics that are played by the security threat groups. It has nothing to do with what we would like to see. It has everything to do with where these potential threats arise from. So you do have to be, cognizant of that, because sometimes certain ethnic boundaries will be used to threaten people in certain ways or take action in certain ways. And you could see that probably from some of the security threat groups that are there. I don't want to speak too much about it, but it's kind of the same a lot through the country. And so there are potentially, some of those ethnic-based security threat groups that might want to do something to kind of bolster them, to throw them up into the limelight. And certainly, I'm not going to mention who those might be because I don't want to help them into the limelight any. But all of these factors, have to be calculated in. And so they may have, congregate, non-congregate there. But I think more likely it's more about compatibility issues. And sometimes you have certain inmates that you can kind of not mainstream in, obviously, but you can start to stream them more into the process by having them interact with a select fewer number of inmates, not in big, massive housing units like I've sometimes worked, but in a more controlled setting with lower level individuals who don't have histories of violence and who are probably, on some enemy lists to be sure where they don't want to get caught up in any of the drama. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think just for the jails, because the inmate, I mean, he's got the trial. I mean, he's got the lawyers coming. He's got a lot of stuff happening. I think for the jails, but I could be wrong. I think they're just going to have that one type of PC because I think sometimes they just may not have the layout or the means to manage both a congregate and a non-congregate, where you do have some higher level maximum security facilities that's what they do. They have a dedicated function. They manage those type of inmates. So they do have housings that are both, congregate, and then you have one that would be non-congregate in relationship to the PC. Also, when the inmate first comes in, so if they put P. Diddy, let's say, on constant watch, you want to, I saw a recent video with Wade Wilson having a visit from his father, Stephen, and we did a breakdown on it. And one of the things I didn't mention in the video, but I can mention here, was that Wade Wilson was in his jumpsuit because he was under some type of mental health watch. Now, usually most facilities, when you have an inmate in a stabilization unit or going through some mental health oversight, direct oversight, they're really not supposed to have any visits until mental health has cleared them, only because you don't want any counter influence. Mental health is trying to figure out who this person is at the most simplest of levels. So you got to make sure that when the person is going through the constant watch, you don't introduce anything that could mess with mental health's ability of understanding is the person or the situation. Let's just do it that way, the person or the situation. So with that said, I noticed Wade Wilson was able to visit his father when he was in a stabilization or some type of mental health oversight. But I think the reason why they did that is because they were looking for Ruiz's body. So at this point here, they were probably going to work through anything to make sure they could try to get that family some closure. But I think for, let's say, P. Diddy's sake, you do want to move him through. So if he doesn't pose a risk to himself or others, you do want to get him to that next level, which would be some form of protective custody, because this will open up the door to legal visits, phone calls, whatever he needs to help mitigate his case, because the case is moving and it's moving rather rapidly. And the reason why I believe, like Russ said, he's no longer in that constant watch status is because when they put something on the news, P. Diddy is able to reach to his people who can negate the false claims of the housing in the SHU. I'm not talking about the crime. That's a different ball game. I'm talking about, they've been talking about his food, that P. Diddy's making all these complaints about housing and this stuff. And so far, P. Diddy has been negating that. So I'm assuming that in order for P. Diddy to do that, he's not on some direct constant watch observation. He is actually in a unit, probably a PC unit, as we mentioned, and he's able to have, contact through phone or maybe through visits with his legal team or those that are approved on his visit list, probably direct family members or whatnot. But you would agree with that, Russ, right?
Yeah, that just seems to be, from what we're able to tell. And, all these, claims came out for a while that he's sleeping on a 1-inch mattress surrounded by rats and, some other things that, seemed, kind of, pumped up and blown up and put out there, for the sensationality of it all. And then that got tamped down. I was surprised that it got tamped down at all. It seemed like it was going to be one of those things that was just, out there and going to, be in the whole universe forever. But no, it was, responded to, if not by Mr. Combs himself, surely by, his people that said that, no, none of those issues were being had by him. So that was kind of refreshing in a way that I thought, because, corrections, we always get, accused of all kinds of things. And, 95 to 99% of that is, just pure made up, unadulterated bullshit.
Well, I think the other thing about that was also he can minimize the attention for that. Like everything else he has no control of, whatever's being said. But this he did. This he immediately attacked. I think it was in his mind. He can minimize the attention, at least get control of that. Because maybe at this point, he doesn't even want the eyes on him. Maybe I'm just going to go ahead and say, yo, none of that's true. Get off my back. Let me go do my time. I don't, I got to clear up for my case. I got all this stuff going on. I don't need the extra bullshit of people hitting me up trying to say, hey, you're on a 1-inch mattress or you have a cell with one window. So now if they're in a PC setting, I definitely think, and I know Russ would agree here, is that he's not going to be housed with everyone else. We know that. And there's a couple of reasons why, too. Even if he wasn't this high celebrity, and I know Russ will love this part because this is the truth. If he wasn't a high celebrity coming in, his crime has made him a celebrity. So mind you, so if he wasn't P. Diddy and he was just a Ganji or a Russ, he's surrounded by a lot of media attention, which now we have to, in the jail setting, we have to mitigate that. We have to handle that, which means that while this trial is going on, you never know what's going to be discovered. You never know what victims are going to come out. I mean, there's just so much ambiguity here that in an effort to say, you know what, let's just universally, if I want to protect this inmate, we don't know what's going to come up with this trial. You got over 100 people making allegations, whatever it is. Let's PC them because this trial is so unpredictable right now. They could pop up anything at any moment. And at this point here, inmates could watch the trial. I mean, inmates have access to cable. They have access to the news, whether it's going to be the newspaper, whether it's going to be a magazine, whether it's going to be televised. So I think in an effort to, we can't control what the news releases, but we can control to some extent the safety of P. Diddy, why this trial is occurring. So right off the bat, again, Russ, if he wasn't famous, coming in, the crime itself would, in my mind, why we got all this stuff happening and the national news that's happening, two things would require definitely PC in my mind, but also frequent interactions from mental health to make sure he's okay as each allegation kind of starts to move forward. Because, I mean, he's getting tons of allegations right here. There's a lot of pressure and stress. And I'm just being objective. I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I'm not here for that. There's going to be a lot of stress. So mental health is going to be there every step of the way. Probably they find out there's 100-something victims. Mental health is going to be right on that unit to make sure he's good and he can manage that type of stress. Would you agree, Russ? Yeah.
And, this is one of those cases where, he started out as famous and then he ends up as infamous. If he didn't have the fame attached beforehand, he certainly would have the infamy attached afterwards. But the thing about that, if you look at it is he has the potential for a lot of victims. a lot of well-known victims, a lot of people who may be looking for paybacks, a lot of people who may be looking to cover the situation up. And so, in the midst of all of the things that he's done or alleged to have done, with regards to, prostitution and the freak offs and the victimization of certain people, some of which may end up being celebrities. We don't know at this point. It certainly appears that, there could be some people, sharpening the knives out there for him, wanting to find a way to do him harm. And so, needless to say, is that should be at the top of the list. And then of course, the fact that if you look at it as a fall from grace, if you will, with a shot at completely losing his. I read through the indictments, and I think he's looking at 15 to life. Basically, I think it's an 18-page indictment, if I recall correctly. He may want to do himself harm under that type of stress. So it's just one of those things. Like we say, we're spitballing here, but we're bringing our expertise to make the best possible guesses and inferences about what's going on behind those closed doors in Brooklyn.
Yeah, and guys, I truly do believe as this case evolves and it gets more stressful for him, he could find himself back and forth in that constant watch. It depends. I mean, whether he chooses to be back there or not, there could be times where mental health may just decide, let's put him there because, something doesn't feel right. Because, I mean, this is ongoing, right? Would you agree with that, Russ?
Well, I would say that may be a possibility, but I doubt that that's going to happen. And one of the reasons is I read one of his pleadings, which was in regards to him trying to make bail. And, if he's decompensating or making self-harm threats or threatening the officers or having, bad interactions, shall we say, I think that decreases the chance that he would get that. And he tried really, really hard. I mean, he was going to put up $50 million and, he was going to be, sort of a self-imposed exile from the internet and one thing after another. And I think the one thing that you have to look at is he tried so hard in that. I think he's going to try equally hard to eventually get out on bail. And so I doubt that he's going to do any of those things unless he truly does have a serious mental break. I think that you're going to see him step up and do everything that's asked of him in order to try and make that bail.
Well, right. But I also think mental health could also influence it without his wanting it. That's what I was trying to say, but I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think mental health, because guys, when everything's in the public news like this, we don't have plausible deniability. So technically, if there is something that we feel is could be extremely stressful, we may just say, put them in there just for one night, cover ourselves. I mean, you could get inmates. I'll give you an example. You get an inmate that escapes from a facility. The moment you capture the inmate, they automatically should be put on constant watch right away, even if the inmate doesn't want to be there. I don't want to be on constant watch. I'm perfectly fine. Doesn't matter. You try to escape. You just lost your freedom. We're going to go ahead and put you on constant watch, and we'll just try to make sure that we get through any impulses that you may have. And then they make a judgment call after they feel that you've processed that immediate stress. So technically, even though you may say you process it, there are some times where mental health may just say, you know what, put them on constant watch because I don't think that's easy to process. And I've seen it. I've seen inmates that may not want to be on constant watch, but in the context, if you don't put them on it, even though the inmate may deny it, the situation is so heavy, has so much gravity that mental health may just say, you know what, let's cross our T's, dot our I's, put them in for 1 or 2 days. And then if the situation at that point should lessen or the impact on him should lessen a little bit, then we'll go ahead and feel comfortable to revisit him again and maybe start stepping him down. Now, if P. Diddy right now, let's say goes, or he is on probably some level of, when they say SHU, I think it's like a high restrictive sort of like an isolated PC. I know people are saying isolation. I'm kind of saying it's protective custody. That's what it is. I know funny how politics can love showing the word isolation because it makes it look like that what we're doing is detrimental to the inmate. But technically, isolation, the word we utilize is protective custody because that showcases what we're doing. We're actually trying to protect the inmate from themselves and others. So I love, there's a little twist on that, but they may say isolation, but it's not. It's protective custody, and protective custody is defined by what we're trying to do. Is the inmate isolated? Of course he's going to be isolated because we're protecting him, but isolation is not the primary function. The primary function is the protective custody. Would you agree with that, with the verbiage, Russ, and the politics behind that?
Yeah, I've long talked about, the misnomers and the things that especially journalists do that are wrong with regards to, using language like isolation, like solitary confinement. Those things by and large don't really exist, at least not anymore. And they haven't existed for a long time because we recognize that, inmates need interactions. Now, they may not like the interactions they get. They may not like dealing with staff. They may not like dealing with mental health. But for the most part, they're in an environment where at least they get a little bit of interaction with people. This is not, Nazi Germany and the cooler with a guy in there that never even sees the officer that feeds him his food. And so I think we've done a real disservice to this whole thing because, people, tried to rid us of one of our best tools, which has been administrative segregation, where we're able to bring people under control that presented an imminent threat to themselves, an imminent threat to other inmates, an imminent threat to staff, and even potential imminent threat to the public by placing them in an area where we had greater control, more restriction, and that sort of thing. And so when people say isolation or they say, solitary confinement, go, no, you don't really know what you're talking about. That's not descriptive, or at least it's not accurately descriptive of what it is that we do by and large. And I hear even people in our own profession, using terminology like that should know better. Let's talk about, what it is, what type of housing we're actually providing them. Is some of that isolative? Yes, some of it is isolative, but it is not isolation, as it were. Does that make sense?
It does, 100%. It does. And as I said, guys, so the difference about people that have experience as opposed to people that think they know is we're actually able to tell you or define things by how we do things and not by what some people may put a noun to. So we're defining what protective custody is because that's what we're doing. And we know we're doing it because we do it. As other people who may not know what we do behind the wall because they never worked there. So they just take a term or a label and they smack it on, which the label minus any type of experience is just a label. We're giving you the experience that tells you that's not isolation, that's protective custody. Sure, like Rice said, the inmate's isolated, but that's not what the primary function is. You got to keep the inmate safe because then on the other extreme, you don't isolate them and you put him out there in the GP and he gets killed. You can't win. They put you in this position where you have to either or, and corrections doesn't work on either or. We work right in the middle. You don't solve problems on either or. Now, because the trial is ongoing and it's happening now, remember the jail's got a lot of responsibility on them because they have to make sure that they give P. Diddy whatever within means, but the resources that he can be able to defend himself during this whole process when they're building the case, because the last thing you want is for the jail not be able to manage balancing, the safety of the facility with the needs of him to be able to present his case up in court with his lawyers. So the last thing you want is for someone to say, well, when he was in jail, there were all these due process concerns and he wasn't able to meet deadlines because he didn't have access to the library. He couldn't get his discovery. He couldn't meet with his lawyers. The jail has to be able to provide P. Diddy with access to the library, access to the discovery, whatever he would be able to do at home. he's got it within means, be able to manage that within the facility. So that means that, you know, if the jail only has one library, you know, they got to schedule him in, they got to lock it down, and they got to bring him into the library, you know, in balance of other inmates as well. But they got to make sure that his time at the jail doesn't affect his ability to have a case in which he's able to utilize the resources that any other inmate would be able to utilize. And that sometimes, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, that sometimes becomes a big problem with the jails that may not be able to house people long-term, because now that could require, they may only have one library, and they may not be able to manage, you know, let's say a full lockdown or whatever it is, to get him over there. And this is going to be consistent. You know, P. Diddy, because the trial's active, he's got all these allegations coming on, he may need access to that library every day. Maybe every time there's a new allegation, he may have to try to get to that library. I mean, it's crazy what people don't realize, that we have to manage in the jail before they utilize the jail as a due process concern. And that's why he lost the case, because when he was in the jail, he could not rightfully get these resources. And I've seen it happen. Would you agree to that, Russ?
Yes, but I would also say that because he has access to an extraordinary amount of cash and a number of what are, you know, no doubt top tier lawyers, that his concerns with regard to due process are going to be, you know, mitigated by that. Because I think that the thing that you'll see that'll be different in his case is not so much going to the law library and having to do that type of research for himself. But I think with him, you'll see that he will end up having constant direct meetings with his lawyers almost on a daily basis, no doubt, because the amount of paperwork that's going to end up being filed in this particular situation is going to be ginormous, as it were. There's already, you know, a lot out there in the internet, not as much on the dockets as I thought there would be. Like I said, I did read the indictment, and I did read, you know, his filing to try and, you know, get bail. But there's a lot more to come, and we'll see how much of that remains under seal. Since it's a federal case, probably we won't see any of this on the TV cameras, though. But who knows? It's going to get interesting.
Yeah, and guys, like we mentioned, whether it's meeting with the lawyers daily or having to get to that library, like what we meant, it's extremely burdensome on the facility. And sometimes I, you know, and maybe Russ would agree, when people realize that, you know, this person's guilty and there's no way around it, they start attacking credibility, they start attacking due process, because they know that the evidence is so great on them that they're not going to win if their effort is going against the evidence. So what they tend to do is, when they know the evidence is against them and they know that pretty much you're dead to rights, we're going to go after the credibility of the people making the allegations. Of course, that's one thing, or the due process. You know, there was okay, Russ.
Yeah, and one of the things that that you'll see with this too is a lot of the allegations that the attorneys are going to make is based upon the concept of preservation, right? They're going to want to have preservation of a chance for him to be able to appeal it. So you can't appeal anything if you haven't preserved it by putting it in writing and put it up before the court. So, you know, every time he doesn't make it to the law library, or every time that he's, you know, a few minutes late to see his lawyer, they'll be taking note of that. They may not actually end up filing anything on it, but if there's anything egregious that happens, or ways that he's, you know, stinted from being able to participate in his own trial, as it were, they will put those things out there, and they'll give the judge a chance to shoot them down. But then it's preserved for a future appeal for that judge that's in charge of the trial itself to be overridden. And so that's where you're going to see a lot of the paperwork come from, because they have to get everything that they can in the record to preserve it for the appeal. And so you're going to see them doing a lot of that type of legwork in this particular case.
Yeah, and guys, and by the way, that's just for one inmate. Yes, he has the means and he gets these big teams, but mind you, on a lesser scale, the jails are doing that for almost every inmate if they decide to go to trial. So maybe on a lesser scale, but it adds up. I mean, you're talking about thousands of inmates that, you know, in these jails that have to be able to, you got to get them to, you know, court, got to get them to see their lawyers, got to get that discovery to them. I mean, you know, it's crazy if people could actually see the daily activities and what the jails are ultimately responsible for. But again, I think, Russ, as we start to come to a close here, Russ, I think that the big thing with this case is he's a celebrity. He's got a lot of eyes on him, which brings a lot of eyes back to this facility. Once again, you know, this facility seems to be pretty popular. I mean, it is a federal facility, so they are going to get a lot of notorious or infamous inmates, like Russ said. I like that. I'm going to use that. So I mean, they have to be on their end, their best game. But I want to mention one thing here. Remember this. Russ said the word sensationalize 100%. When you have a facility under the spotlight, the smallest of things becomes news. I mean, just literally something like, oh, we had a peanut butter sandwich today. Oh my God. And it gets millions of views because people are so interested in that life. And then the sad thing is they wind up the way the picture's painted, they wind up now questioning the operations of the facility because of someone who decided, we're going to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that the facility offered famous because it was fed to P. Diddy. You know, be wary of getting caught up in the sensationalism of what the news tries to promote. I mean, you may see something or say something, but there's no context there. It's just he's giving lousy food. Well, explain lousy. Well, he's giving peanut butter sandwiches. Well, he's on constant watch. He can't have utensils, so he's getting finger food. You know, plus he's also in a prison. He's not going to get the best food. But, you know, they love to go ahead and get that attention. They love to, oh, he stubbed his toe today on his Foot Locker. Oh, that's front page. You know, that's front page. P. Diddy stubbed his toe. Or so they sensationalize it because they know right now P. Diddy has the attention. So mind you, every little thing that they're going to mention is going to be brought to the highest level. So, you know, it gets people's attention. But at the end of the day, it's just another day. I mean, for the people that are working in that jail, it's just another day. It's just another inmate. It's just another person that's got to get through trial and finally get sentenced or in this case, maybe sentenced or found not, whatever the case may be. It's just that the media puts attention on it. And one last thing. I know everybody tends to bastardize the criminal justice system, saying it's unfair and all this other stuff. You know what the funny thing is? When it comes to putting bias, it's the media. You know, whether P. Diddy did it or not, you know, obviously we have a lot of reason to believe he did. I just want to put something out there. They're putting this all out on TV. And then when he does go up to trial, of course, you know, everything that's been put on TV is going to be biased. But it's the criminal justice system that's biased. We're not biased. We're not the one going on the news, you know, telling you everything about his case so people can go ahead and make judgment before his case is heard. It's just the news is doing that. And then we in the jails, we in the prisons have to manage that. Because when the news is trying to get that views and they're trying to get their money, their sponsors, their rate, whatever the hell they're looking for, they sensationalize everything. They add a little oomph to get people's attention. And now we have to manage that oomph. We have to manage that little push to make that story a little bit more exciting. So we're behind the wall scrambling every time something's put out there or when they make a guess. Oh, we assume this happened, or we got some intel from an unidentified source, and then later on they find out it wasn't true. Oh, that's great, because when the moment you mention that unidentified source in the jail or in the prison, we are scrambling because you release something to the news with no care in the world of how it's going to affect the people that need to manage that inmate, let alone the inmate themselves. So I think when people go to attack the criminal justice system saying it's unfair and unbiased, it's crazy because the people that are really making it happen, the people that are really making it unfair are the ones that are just releasing these stories out into the world without any care of how that affects not just the case, but the people that got to manage the individual. I'd love to get your thoughts on that before we close.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with our criminal justice system. There's a lot to unpack with, our agencies that back up and bolster the Department of Justice and things like that. There's a lot of work maybe to be done in some of those areas. In this case, I would say that it appears that P. Diddy did all this to himself. That doesn't mean that every one of the allegations is 100% true. But we're going to have a chance to look at all this. I hope that above all else, he receives a fair trial. But more than receiving a fair trial, I hope he receives justice, whatever that is. And that's not me saying that he's guilty or not guilty. That's me saying that I just hope for the best outcome, not for him, but for the system and for the victims that are potentially involved in this. There's going to be a lot more speculation going on. There's going to be a lot more filings, and these are not the type of filings that I usually read, but I do read a lot of things that happen in a lot of the SCOTUS cases and so forth. And so when I was able to read what was going on with them, and it wasn't even about making this video. It was just, familiarizing myself with some things some other friends of mine have done online, as it were.
Yeah, and by the way, we only did it to provide clarity. I mean, me and Russ were talking about doing the show yesterday, and we were thinking like, you know what, there's no reason because P. Diddy already negated the claims that we were going to discuss. So we were just really going to put it out there because they made these allegations with no context. And then basically we were going to jump on and provide some clarity as best we could within our experience. And then it turned out that his people already negated the claim. And then I got to thinking, because I still been getting the request, and I called Russ and I said, Russ, maybe your idea was good to just do it anyway. Because, I still got people asking me questions. So it's funny because once it's in the air, even though the person who they said it says that they didn't say it, people still have a curiosity to it because it's out there. And Russ sent me some of the things. I took a screenshot of it. We talked about food. He's in a unit with one window or a small window. I mean, the guards are allegedly tampering with his food. I mean, to get him to stop eating. I mean, a lot of this is really just an unproven assumption that I'm sure people would love to say it's happening because they believe that they know what our world is like and, just to get a little drama into it. But I'm not even going to entertain some of that. I'm not saying it can't happen because no world's perfect. No profession is perfect. I get it. But, I mean,
it's confirmation bias.
Yeah, I agree.
It's people chasing confirmation bias, and that's all what it is.
It's like, guys, it's like what's likely versus what's probable. With all the attention on this one inmate, I will guarantee you, to the best that they can, they're going to be as pristine as they need to be with him because the media is still active and they run with these type of stories, even if they can't identify the person who made the allegation. It's funny how the media for a few hours was running on these claims that P. Diddy made as if P. Diddy made the claims, and then they're running it and they're putting it out there, which puts an automatic bad light on the facility. And I'm sure the facility's scrambling like, what the hell's happening? Why am I getting these allegations? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, a couple hours later, P. Diddy never said that. Oh, thank you, news. Thank you once again. Because what is a simple error in your storytelling turned out probably to be a hell of a management problem when that light was cast on the facility. Hey, Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, just like to say, had a good time. I think this is informative for those who may be involved in corrections. But may work at some facilities that are smaller and they don't have much of a chance to maybe see what it looks like from the larger perspective, where we deal with people, that made national news for reasons good or bad. And so, a lot of us, we have worked, these larger facilities with thousands and thousands of inmates. and hundreds and hundreds of infamous inmates and serial killers and everything else, and had to watch media feeding frenzies on all kinds of stuff. And so I hope that we gave people some perspective and an idea. And as things evolve in this, maybe we'll do something else on Diddy. If there's something else, inside some of the filings that we think, might add to some of the dialogue that's going on. But it's gonna be a fascinating case, actually, because there's so much involved. It's not just the victims, but it's the blackmail and the pressuring, and the fact that there were a lot of big names involved in things. So man, buckle up. It could get much more interesting in the very near future, but we're going to see.
Yeah, and guys, we'll do the show tomorrow, the next day, about the inmate we mentioned from Maricopa County. I'll just do a quick breakdown on that because we still want to also provide correctional content to this, but this also relates to the world. And then also we're going to do some more video breakdowns, also even of interrogations, because it's been requested of us since we did the Wade Wilson. But I like these current event things. But again, I want you guys to know one thing: we are not experts that follow every aspect of whatever the story may be, but we do follow, or we do have an understanding of certain things. And those are the things that we explore. Usually it could be a reaction to someone else they had on the news that was talking about the specific area, or maybe just information that we want to provide because we feel it can help clarify. But with that said, we don't claim to be the P. Diddy experts. We don't claim to be the Wade Wilson experts, but we do like to put in input related to certain areas that may fall within our expertise. So it's more about the areas that they may fall into. And then eventually when they fall out of it, we may no longer follow it. We may just, that's it. We're done. Our part's done. But it's still interesting because it does expand the channel a little bit, allows me to provide content for an audience that does follow true crime. But, as I said, we're not perfect. We're figuring out as it goes. But I think this information here is bar none. You're not going to get this type of detail at any other channel. And this is as objective as can be. I mean, I know a lot of people may even follow the channels that are ran by the former inmates, and that's great. I get it. They do provide a perspective. I 100% get it. They provide that perspective of being an inmate. And maybe that's something that's tough for me and Russ to provide from that immediate tactical side or that immediate level. But we manage prisons. We manage jails. And there's a lot there that unless you've done it, you just don't know. And that's what we provide on this channel. And that's the key from so many different perspectives. So if you want to get the perspective of not entertainment technically, but a true understanding of this world, and also one other thing, we felt comfortable, me, Russ, and Joe, when we talked about breaking down interviews and interrogations and stuff like that, we feel comfortable crossing into that to some extent, not to make a diagnosis, but we know how the criminal mind thinks. I got books on the market, manipulation, undue familiarity. I mean, we have a relationship to how they think because we work around them every day. Answer their letters, see them face to face. I mean, passively, we have more experience with the criminal mind than probably the top selling psychiatrists who define their life by interviewing hundreds of serial killers. Okay, you could work with hundreds of serial killers and spend maybe an hour or two with each one, or you could spend 25 years with just one of them. 25 years with just one of them, and know who they really are. Not the image that they're trying to sell you because they know it's going to release to the public. If you truly want to know how the criminal mind works, you should ask someone that works in corrections, because the mask is not there for them. The mask is removed. And the correctional officers, the people that work in the correctional facilities, they're probably the ones outside of the victims who have dealt with these people at the most honest of level of who they are, I mean. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify every time I post a video. Stay safe. Double thumbs.